All right, Dave, picture this.
Okay.
You have spent a bulk of your life fighting off an invading force to your home planet. You have succeeded 2 times now, but these invaders are back, and they're after your family. How are you going to chase them off your planet for good and all? How are you going to do it, Dave?
Again, I guess for the third time, I guess I will battle them back and kick them off my planet repetitively again.
That's exactly the answer we're looking for, because that's exactly what happens in Avatar Part 3, which is what we're going to talk about today, along with how writer and director James Cameron just keeps making $1 billion at the box office. How does he do it, Dave? Let's go to the movies. Welcome to Picture This, the podcast where we examine the weekly box office and ask, what do movie-going trends say about American culture? I'm Max, a screenwriter and son of an independent movie theater owner who has spent his whole life in love with movies.
And I'm Dave. Over the last 10 years, I've worked for a filmmaker, an agent, and at a movie studio in movie marketing. Today's episode, we're talking about not just Avatar, Fire and Ash, not just how that movie's made over $1 billion in the worldwide box office, but also how its director, James Cameron, Big Jim, keeps making $1 billion at the box office on all of his movies. How is it possible, Max? I just don't know.
If I had the answer, I'd be making $1 billion at the box office too, Dave.
You're going to shed some light on it, man. Drop some knowledge on us. But first, as always, we're going to talk about the state of the biz.
All right, Dave, so state of the biz, what do we got with the current box office?
Avatar is going to win the weekend. The real thing to highlight, though, is another release from an auteur filmmaker that I think many cinephile, nerdophile, letterbox fans like we are fans of. Mm-hmm. Danny Boyle produced an Alex Garland written movie 28 years later, The Bone Temple. The previous installment, which came out summer of 25, was a big hit, made about $150 million worldwide, had great reviews. This was an unusually quick follow-up in January, had good reviews coming into it, and it looks like it's going to cap out around $13 to $15 million for the 4-day weekend, giving it the extra day. And I think most people in town are thinking that's pretty darn disappointing.
But, you know, I was wondering why they released it in what is traditionally known as the killing fields of January, where movies go to die. Because I thought the last one was fairly successful, but I also think it had maybe mixed responses from fans, even though the reviews were good. So maybe that's why they kind of let it out to pasture here.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually you can find one or two runaway hits, and maybe that's what Sony, the studio that released 28 years later, was trying to do here. It was packaged together to be elevated horror. I use air quotes there because it had a fancy writer, Alex Garland, the guy who did movies like Ex Machina and Civil War, like kind of a cool guy writing it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite writers for sure, and I'm also a huge Danny Boyle fan, so like, yeah, I'm jazzed to go see this movie in a big way.
Agreed, and kind of packaged a little bit more like, oh, this is not just regular horror; it's going to be fancy horror. And a lot of people thought that delivered. However, this movie, Max, is going to make, call it about $13 million just for if it was a 3-day weekend.
Sure.
It's not that different box office wise from another horror movie, which was most people would consider very lowbrow horror, which was Primate. Primate opened up just a couple weekends ago. I think it was January 9th. And that made $11 million and was much cheaper, much simpler in its production.
Dude, it feels like the concept of a Roger Corman movie, too.
Yeah.
It's like a monkey attacks and kills people, and you're like, okay, this is a B movie.
Yeah, one would look at 28 years later and say, you know, story of a young boy coming into his own in a post-apocalyptic world, dealing with themes of growth and death versus violent monkey movie.
These teenage girls should not have a pet monkey. The end.
And they essentially are making very similar box office. So that's a little disappointing. But just, you know, continue down the run of what's notable in the box office. Housemaid, which stars Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried, based on a book, opened up over the Christmas holiday and is still making money. The drops week over week is very low, which means people are continuing to see the movie on the 4th weekend, 5th weekend, 6th weekend. And that's a great sign. I think another to our trend of movies based on books over the last 18 months to 2 years. we'll look to see
Yeah.
if that continues in a movie like Wuthering Heights coming out in about a month.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because like Wuthering Heights is considered like highbrow literature, and The Housemaid is like kind of like more pop literature. And those pop literature books have been doing really well. I actually went to see The Housemaid in a very uncharacteristic move, and I
Yeah.
had a fucking blast, dude. I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's an absolute mess, but it kind of reminds me of a movie like Cliffhanger, where it's like that movie's a mess and doesn't make any sense if you really examine anything. But like everybody showed up to work and worked as hard as they can to make it awesome. And that's what I feel like Housemaid is. Man, the audience was laughing. They were shouting at the screens. They were saying, "Don't go in there." Dude, it was fucking killer. I would highly recommend seeing it.
Max, do you think we did a pod about what constitutes a big dumb movie last year, which was so fun, but did
Yeah.
we ignore the fact that, like, not to be gender normative, any gender can see any movie, but
Yeah.
we ignore a more female skewing version of a big dumb movie? And do you think this qualifies?
Well, I don't know if you could call it big, but like it's a medium dumb movie, and I feel like yeah, it attracts a largely female audience. We can measure that, and I feel like they are going to satiate the same probably emotional responses that we go when we see something like Predator Badlands. I think that's a very astute observation, Dave.
I think that's fun, man. I think we're allowed to want to go to the movie theater and maybe not turn our brain on high, maybe turn it on low and just enjoy it, man. That
Yeah.
seems to be what people are doing for Housemaid, and so good on it. But a movie that is also having really good legs is Marty Supreme. We talked about it briefly on our last episode. It was another Christmas release like Housemaid. It's now up to almost $81 million domestically for a total of about $95 million worldwide. That's really good for a movie like this, of this size. It recently hit the trades that it's the A24's biggest earning movie. However, I think I see in our outline, Max, the question of, like, is this going to make money? And it is a very
Yeah.
interesting question, Max. What do you think?
I'm going to talk a lot about what box office versus actual ticket sales means later when we get into Avatar.
Okay.
And I think it's a very interesting question with Marty, because if you just look at the subject matter and the fact that it sold this many tickets, I mean, I think I made this argument with One Battle After Another. The fact that it
Exactly.
sold a certain number of tickets is actually pretty remarkable. But they also spent so much money trying to convince people to go see this movie. The fact that they are likely not to see a profit off of it, that's got to be an emotionally complicated feeling to have as a studio executive. I don't know what it means for the movie business at large, but what I do like that it proves is that you can make, it'll probably cross $100 million at the box office for
Yep.
this movie about a fucking ping pong table tennis superstar.
Yeah.
Like, great. There's a movie audience for that. I think that's very good news. The real question is do you have to spend that much money on marketing in order to make it happen? If so, maybe not as good of news as we want it to be. I don't know, Dave. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of different narratives that we like to talk about on this pod. There's the narrative of the movie that is, put together and packaged so perfectly for a cinephile group and, disappoints, or a really poorly packaged movie that, like, doesn't feel like it was well thought out and somehow magically makes a lot of money. This is very much the murky middle. I think this is especially interesting because there is no right answer. And to your point,
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing about One Battle After Another. I'm very happy that a movie like Marty Supreme is in our world and that Josh Safdie, that director, made the leap. And I think this will be a movie we'll think about for the next 5 or 10 years, and how it met this particular movie star, Timothy Chalamet, when it did, and what it means for cinema overall. But if you are a studio executive who made it, there is that nervous feeling of just like, no, but I did a good job. I made a good thing. But did you make it for the right price? And, like, all
Yeah.
those like little details really can come to bite you. So I think it's an interesting question. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit when it comes to awards in the next coming weeks, and how that can oftentimes quote unquote save an executive if their movie maybe isn't the most profitable for the studio ultimately, but if it wins something like a Best Picture, or if Timothy Chalamet wins something like Best Actor, is
Yeah.
that justified, even if it doesn't make the money?
That's a bigger question for you, Dave, because I've ignored the awards for so many years. What role do the awards play in our culture for real? And what does that do? Maybe not for an individual movie, but maybe for a studio long term, because you could look at A24 and be like, wow, they didn't really make money off Marty Supreme. But if it wins Best Picture, they're going to be able to sell the rights to it over and over and over again for the next 50 years. And that'll be part of what makes A24 itself valuable as a studio, is having that film library. So I don't know.
Well, this is a perfect transition, because the Golden Globes happened last weekend, which most people view as the start of the award season, and culminates at the Oscars, which is in mid-March. There previously has been documentation of a box office lift when a movie wins an award, specifically for the Academy Awards, but that has been dwindling over the years. I think with the clear sign that the viewership of the Academy Awards has dwindled over the last 15, 20 years. It used to be that 40, 50 million people watched the Academy Awards. Now I think the last year was around 17 million.
Yeah, and if you do the math on like what the U.S. population was when 50 million people were watching it compared to what the U.S. population is now, and we're talking about, in some cases, 100 million fewer people living in the U.S. and 3 times as many people watching the Academy Awards, you're like, yeah, that it really used to occupy a certain...
It used to be like the Super Bowl. Absolutely. It used to be like the Super Bowl, man. And for a nerd like me, like, it still is in many ways. I still love Academy Awards Sunday and treat it as something. But like, I don't know if that many more people saw Anora last year because it won Best Picture. I think more people did, but I don't know if it was the biggest boom. I will say, however, though, within the insular world of Hollywood, it does help executives keep their jobs. If you can, and I think my most recent example, just to mention here, is at the Golden Globes, famously at the table where Warner Brothers executives were sitting, Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdy, these two studs in 2025, were the ones that were at the forefront of greenlighting One Battle After Another, Sinners, Weapons, Minecraft movie,
Final Destination,
Bloodlines, The Conjuring: Last Rites, a hugely profitable and culturally and critically supported run of movies. Before those movies came out, their boss, his name was David Zaslav, was publicly looking to replace them. And then at the Golden Globes, the director of One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson, thanks Mike DeLuca, and right behind him is the guy, David Zaslav, who was going to fire him 10 months ago. So, so I think to your point of what these awards mean, it is all freaking silly. It really is. But in this world of like, hey, it does matter in these very small insular rooms of who gets to greenlight what, it is a bit of a power play. And I mentioned that, Max, because we're just past the Golden Globes, and as we record this, we're a few days away from hearing the Oscar nominations. So I'm fascinated to get into that.
I'm actually recently newly fascinated for 2 reasons. One, I did finally watch it last year, and I thought the Conan Oscars was a great Oscars. It was like a return to form, what the show should be. I thought it was really well done. But also, my favorite movie podcast, What Went Wrong, did an amazing episode on Shakespeare in Love that mostly focused on the Oscar campaign that Harvey Weinstein did for that movie that helped it beat Saving Private Ryan, which is probably the biggest shocker in Oscar history. So based upon their research, I would say what I took away from it was the way Oscar campaigns have worked since then, I think might be part of the reasons why the general public doesn't care so much about the Oscars anymore, because much like our larger political atmosphere, much like our larger business world atmosphere, it all feels kind of corrupt and untrue with the experiences that people have. I will say, coming off of the results of the Golden Globes, we had Hamnet win.
Hamnet won for Best Drama, and One Battle After Another won in the category of Best Musical or Comedy.
Yeah. Was Wicked even nominated for musical? Like the musical comedy category was even a bigger joke than it was in the past. But yeah, so you have One Battle and Hamnet winning Best Picture, and then Sinners given this kind of like weird award, like Cinematic Achievement Award.
Yes, it's an award recently introduced, trying to get people that are interested in quote unquote more mass appeal movies. And a previous winner was a movie like Barbie, which I think most people wouldn't think would win any kind of like fancy award, but they're trying to give love to the more mainstream awards. Meanwhile, this year, the movie Sinners won, and I think it could have just as easily been a close third place to a Hamnet or a One Battle After Another as far as its artistic achievement.
My big takeaway from those results was, now that I've seen a lot of these movies, is I think the only film, not the only film, but the film that is most going to come out of 2025 and be the film that a studio gets to relicense and resell and consider a proud part of its library and be something that audiences remember, and the thing that audiences experienced and had the most excitement for in 2025 is Sinners. And when you're talking about the best picture of the year and the general public thinks that the people who are in charge of saying what the best picture of the year is a dishonest, corrupt group, it makes the Oscars feel really irrelevant. And to me, Sinners should be the best picture winner, in my opinion. Now, again, I'm just one guy, but again, I think it's going to be the one that most stands the test of time out of all the movies that come out this year. If it lost to something like One Battle After Another, I wouldn't be surprised, because again, we've said it many times in this pod that also probably will. But Sinners, I think when most people think of the movie that they saw in 2025 that they remember, non-cinephile, non-LA New York people, it's going to be Sinners.
I think you're probably right. But hell, and maybe I'm just in such a postmodern 2026 era, but like, you're telling me a body of people together, Max, is corrupt? What?
Yeah, I know, it's just
surprising me.
Not
Jesus.
super revelatory or nothing, but
yes, but let's get to something a little bit more pure, like the Na'vi. Shall we transition?
Yeah. All right, so let's get into our main topic of the day. That is Avatar 3, Fire and Ash. And we're also going to get into James Cameron's entire box office history and kind of asking the question, what influence has he had on American culture as a whole? What is his legacy? Now, Dave, you have something very important to confess to our listeners, in that
Maxwell Kessler, I apologize to you and the fans that I, as of January 18th, have not made it to Avatar Fire and Ash.
You know what, Dave? I understand. It took me a while to get to it as well. I only saw it earlier this week. So we'll go ahead and skip over the 10-word log lines, because honestly, it's very similar to what the 10-word log line would have been for the last two. Essentially,
I will share you my 10-word log
line.
Oh,
you got one? All right, let's do it.
I will share you my 10-word log line to the movie that I have not yet seen, which is James Cameron cares about the environment. I get it. What's yours, Max?
Mine is, really ripping off things that everybody has said about this franchise for a while. Ferngully dances with wolves in a video game. And that's what feels different about it. This movie felt even more immersive than the last two. It was one of the huge, awesome parts about seeing it.
How did you see it? Did you see it in the full IMAX?
IMAX, 3D. I did the whole deal. I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here and say that these movies really are hard to talk about their influence, because I think there's so much more about the experience of seeing the movie itself than it is about the characters or the mythology that it is creating. When we think about big cultural impact movies like Star Wars or Marvel or Jurassic Park or Indiana Jones, like, so much of what we love about those are the characters. And what is so wonderful about Avatar is the experience of really feeling like you're going somewhere like the Pandora planet that you are placed on. So it is, again, the Sully family, the Na'vi, fighting off human invaders who are trying to plunder this beautiful planet for all of its resources. One of the things that I think is really awesome about this movie that was definitely missing from the last one is there is an antagonistic force that we didn't previously see in the other two movies. It's like new, and that is this other tribe of Na'vi. They are fire-based. They want to set everything on fire. They do not worship the god Awa that all the other Na'vi really worship, and it comes out of the trauma of having seen their forest burn down. I thought, actually, what is so awesome about this movie is that villain. She had this like kind of crazed warrior mentality that the Na'vi, which is, you know, a big criticism of the film, is that it follows the noble savage narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular tribe was at war with the other Na'vi people. You know, they aren't all peace loving, one with nature types of people. I thought it gave it a little bit more texture. And this particular queen of this tribe, for one, was a woman, for two, was very dangerous and like violent, didn't take shit, wasn't afraid of the humans, wasn't afraid of anybody, and was out for her own personal interests of spreading power, which is to say that it's not just humans that have this sickness, it's kind of all conscious beings. So I thought that was really rad. I thought the actress that portrayed her did a really great job. I thought Avatar 3 was a lot better than Avatar 2.
That's interesting, Max. My holdback for this third was that the second felt similar enough to the first, and my concern was that the third was going to feel this similar. And I think
Similar enough, Dave. It was the same. They resurrected a bad guy so they could have the same bad guy in the second movie. The complaints about Avatar 3, that does feel like retreading. There's a lot of like people getting kidnapped and people escaping, and then people getting kidnapped again, and then people escaping. But overall, what I thought was also very impressive about this movie is that there were so many characters, and they all had their own point of view. They all had their own personal like mission and desire and drive in the film. They all had their own character arcs. And something I didn't realize, there's a lot of really legitimate criticism to give to this movie about like the oversimplification of Native people.
Yeah.
But what this movie does extremely well is gender parity. There are so many female characters in this movie, and they are all very different from one another. Some of them are warriors. Some of them are like more spiritual. Some of them are just kids. Some of them are leaders. And none of them are, their main role is not to be the romantic interest of a male character. It's actually pretty incredible, the scope of how many women that James Cameron cast in this movie so that they can be their own characters. And people aren't talking about that at all. And I think that's something we really got to tip our hat to, because you don't see it in other movies unless it's like Barbie.
That's a great point. And also, again, a nod to the filmmaker. I mean, this is the guy who really made Ellen Ripley a badass. And then Terminator 1 and 2, Sarah Connor also having a great arc of like, she was pretty bewildered in the first one, and then in Terminator 2 turns out to be just the ultimate badass. So again, another nod and tip of the cap of Big Jim, just like knowing how to make powerful women and doing it interesting. So, and to your point, maybe I shouldn't sleep on it. Maybe it's just like he's the Beatles, and he's become so ubiquitous that we're just kind of like, yeah, okay, you're great, we get it.
I mean, look, like I said, there's plenty to be disappointed in this movie. I mean, my dad hated this movie. Like, hated it. He's like, I can't believe I sat through that whole thing. That's so, like, it was so boring. I was just waiting for something to happen the whole time. So I don't know. I might have been a little bit primed to go see it, but I actually thought that it was super. I was surprised by how much I legitimately enjoyed it.
That's great, man. That's great. And you said the action was really, really great.
Dude, there's an action sequence early in the film that I thought was really, really cool. And you just keep getting them in a way that you didn't get in the second one. So he gave us a lot in this.
Okay.
So yeah, I was surprised at how much I liked it, Dave. But what was there other outside forces keeping you, or like, so quashing your interest, or what prevented you?
So I mean, I think we're going to probably talk about marketing in a little bit, but I think because I was not able to make it to the theater, I was trying to listen to some of the publicity around it. And I think one thing that I was surprised by is that James Cameron was on the marketing run this time leading up to the movie. Previously, like in 1 and 2, they weren't really putting Jim out there, but for whatever reason, he was doing a lot of podcasts. He did a screening at the DGA where his friend Guillermo del Toro kind of did a Q&A. And you know, he's really articulate, and he's also really confident to the point of cocky.
Yeah, I saw a lot of clips from interviews, old and new, in a way that I was thinking like, oh, this is unusual. I haven't seen this much of James Cameron in the past. Yeah, I guess I didn't register that, but yeah.
Yeah, and I question whether Disney, who helped pay for it, was said, "Hey, on this third one, Jim, we need you out there talking about stories about Titanic and stories about how great you are with previous movies and all that stuff." But there was one soundbite that I heard on multiple outlets that I was really surprised that he was touting, which was he is really into this motion capture and this mocap technology. I am not an expert in this at all, but he's always been invested in new technology and how it can help affect the cinematic experience, and that's great. I love that filmmakers did that. But he was touting this fact about his directing in Avatar, claiming that this motion capture technology, he says it's the purest form of acting because it allows the actor to genuinely just react to the words on the page and conjure up the emotion of the scene. I think the quote is, I'm paraphrasing, which is like, yeah, this technology, it's, you don't have to worry about that the light is going down in the corner and that the action, behind actor A and B is going to come from right to left and that the wind is picking up. It's like, I love this technology because I can worry about that later and I can just focus on the actors. And I think that he meant for that to be like a real positive. And for me, I was like, what are you talking about, man? So to me, like and could just be personal. It felt like he's now so fascinated with the technology. He's almost more becoming an animator.
Yeah, he's
And
kind of lost to it. You can tell. You can
yeah.
tell because, like, look, when I did high school theater,
Is this where we drop a
the
clip of you in high school theater into the pod?
dude, I should try and find one because I know there's footage out there somewhere. The theater teacher would always be like pulling her hair out before we got into costume because, like, high school kids, they're messing around. Some of them aren't even there to be actors. They're not taking it seriously. But as soon as I put a costume on or anybody else put a costume on, suddenly you're someone else.
Yeah.
And then suddenly when you're standing in front of a set, you're somebody else. And if you walk on to like a fully built set and somebody gives you an actual prop, and I know that in the motion capture, they were given real props here and there and on some built sets here and there, but you're not immersed in the world as much. And some of these actors, some of these veteran actors, like particularly Zoe Saldana and Stephen Lang, who I thought was really great. Yeah, they can do it. They could like use their imagination and they can be there. But there's a couple of actors who's just like, you could just tell that they're just like lost. They're like staring at their co-star who's got weird dots on their face in a giant green room. And they're supposed to be, there's times where a couple of like one of the younger actors really has to put the emotional weight of the entire film on his shoulders and he just can't do it. And like, it's not good, but I don't really want to blame him for it. Cause I've seen that footage that you're talking about of these actors in those spaces. And I'm like, I don't envy having to perform that way. That would fucking suck. I don't think Jim's right about that. And I think it definitely shows. Jim, sorry, but like you're not getting the best performances that you can get in that type of motion capture. God bless the actors that can do it. They're fucking amazing because it's really hard.
Agreed. I think it's a special talent, but for whatever reason, that was an unusual marketing nugget that was not a selling point for me. That was actually kind of pulling me out of it a bit. Yeah. That'll probably lead to the box office, which I know you're going to get into deeply, which is like whatever my trepidation is on some of these titles, I'm in the minority because man, people are seeing this movie.
Well, Dave, that's what's interesting is I don't think you are in the minority. And I think the numbers tell a very interesting specific story. So with that said, let's take a look at box office, ticket sales between Avatar 1, 2, and 3, and all of James Cameron's previous films to see what exact influence and what a moment Avatar 3 is in our culture. So, Avatar 3, its opening box office weekend, one of the biggest franchises of all time, only really came in around $89 million, which is an awesome opening, but it's not like these $200 million openings that we've seen with other movies in the past, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The opening week, it got in a little shy of $150 million, but 18 days in, worldwide, it was over $1 billion worldwide.
Pretty impressive. But you sound like you got some doubts in your voice. Please,
well,
please
it's not
do explain.
doubts. It's reality checks, man. It's reality checks. So these numbers are from about 5 days ago. Avatar was sitting at $347 million domestically. And I'm going to focus the rest of this conversation on its domestic gross. I wanted to really know how many tickets that actually means in the domestic box office, largely because I know that when you go to see a movie on IMAX and in 3D, as most people have gone to see Avatar 3 this year, that
Yeah.
you pay a premium upcharge for that. So we've talked in the past, generally speaking, we believe that the average ticket price in America is around $11. A huge reason for that is so many people go to the movies on a discount Tuesday where the
Mm-hmm.
regular price ticket, non-IMAX, non-3D, non-special format gets cut in half and can drop as low as like $7.
Yeah.
Now, if you go see the movie in IMAX in 3D, even on discount Tuesdays, you might be paying half price for the ticket, but you're still paying full price for all those premiums. So I consulted the technological gods here. We all know how reliable they are. I went to Google's Gemini to see if we could actually figure out the formula for the average ticket price for Avatar specifically.
Okay.
Long story short, about 2/3 of the Avatar tickets, these are figures coming from Disney, are sold in premium formats. So
Wow.
Gemini helped me create a weighted average. And that came out to about $17 for an Avatar ticket versus $11 for most other tickets.
Okay.
$347 million divided by $17 is around 20 million tickets sold. That is about 6% of the US population.
Okay.
However, I wanted to know one more thing. And I wanted to know how many people are repeat viewers versus how many people are just seeing it one time. My assumption was, well, Dave, what would your assumption be for Avatar 3?
Well, shit, man. Like, you're catching me on. You've heard what my thoughts are. I would think you'd be one and done. I would think you'd be like, "Yep, I'm there for it. I want to see it in a big giant screen." But
Right.
this isn't a situation where I need to unpack the Navi's true motivation. Unlike a movie like Sinners or One Battle After Another.
So
Am I
it's
right?
awesome that you mentioned Sinners because I'm
Okay.
going to use that as a big standard of comparison. Now, when
Oh,
Sinners
okay.
came out, what was one of the main things that we talked about? What would your assumption be about how many repeat viewers Sinners had?
Yeah, that movie had, we talked about it on our pod, had an unbelievably unusual lack of a drop, which normally we talked at length. Movies drop anywhere from 40 to 60% usually. And this one anomaly of Sinners, like it dropped like 4% or something like that, which I think we would deduce that people were going to see it more than once. People were coming to it later on. What would you deduce from that, Max?
Well, I'm going to say anecdotally, right? So
Okay.
anecdotally, it's very simple for me. One, I saw Avatar 3 one time. It took me 6 weeks to go see it in theaters. Sinners, I saw the week it came out, which is very unusual for me. And then I went and saw it again in theaters because the movie, like you were saying, was so dense. There were things that I wanted to unpack, things I wanted to re-examine. Also, like there was so much chatter on social media about it, the costumes, and they were talking
Yeah.
about the songs, like what were the actual lyrics in the songs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's actually data on repeat viewers that the studios want to find out. I didn't realize this, and I've never seen it happen, even though I attend the two most like the busiest theaters in the United States of America. But yeah, there are two companies called Post Track and CinemaScore who straight up stand outside of movie theaters and ask viewers as they walk out if this is the first or second time they've seen the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because so many of the major chains like AMC or Alamo or Regal now have like membership, you could actually track pretty easily if their members are going to see it more than one time. And per the data that I got, which again is running through a large language model and is not necessarily the most reliable, but the data is saying more people have seen Avatar 3 twice than went to go see Sinners twice.
What?
I know,
Really?
which fucking blows me away.
Why? Why, Max? Why?
Anyhow,
I don't know, man.
per that math, the other interesting thing about Sinners is a lot of people went to go see it on discount Tuesdays.
Really?
Like a lot. There was a time, I think in the third week of Sinners, where they sold 1 million tickets on a Tuesday alone.
That's insane.
So when it's all said and done, Avatar is sitting at, like I said, it's about a week old. This data about 374. Sinners topped out at $279 million dollars domestic.
Okay.
So if you were to just make a guess about the difference between total tickets sold between Sinners and Avatar, what would you think? Like, how much more would you think Avatar had, based
You're
upon
talking,
like essentially $100 million difference in the box office?
and we're talking domestically only, right?
We're talking domestically only. Yeah, internationally, it's not even close. We're just talking about as far as the influence that these movies are having on the American people. How many individual people, not repeat viewers, went to go see Avatar versus went to go see Sinners?
6. No, I'm let's see. I have no idea. I have no idea. Tell me. Fill me in.
So, per this data, when you take the weighted average that the Avatar ticket price was around $17 and that the Sinners ticket price might have been below that $11 average because so many people went as viewers on Tuesdays, their individual unique viewers is actually really close. They're about the same. And that is that Avatar had about 18 million individual Americans went to go see the movie versus 19.3 million seeing Sinners.
Wow. Now, and so you're saying that more people, after all the PLF and repeat viewings of Avatar, more people went to see Sinners than Avatar in America.
Now the number is probably tied at this point because Avatar has done about another $20 million at the domestic box office since I did this math, which would put them, with the average ticket price around $17 million at about the same. But that's pretty remarkable, right?
Absolutely, man. Especially because one is an R-rated vampire movie, and one has been trying for the last 20 years to position itself as this all audience and a
broadest reach possible.
Pretty typical hero's journey that again, you like a story in a genre that you and I really like and enjoy, but is the most broadly appealing story versus America in the old South and the very specific Black experience and Asian experience of that mixed with some vampire mashup. Wow.
Yeah, like super, super specific versus the broadest on purpose. And like James Cameron's been very public about that, like trying to make the broadest movie possible. So as far as like the reach into the American population, Sinners sits at about 5.6% of the US population who bought a ticket to go see Sinners in theaters. That's about 1 in 17 people. When I did the math, again, they're probably pretty much tied at this point, but Avatar 3 was only sitting at about 5.1%. So then I had a really big question, Dave.
Okay.
I was like, how does this apply to movies in the past? Because in the past, like there's a lot of statistics coming out now about how IMAX has had its greatest year yet. And I'm like, that's really cool because the IMAX experience is great. But it also indicates that because we've had such an increase in the box office and it can be so dramatic. I mean, we're talking about $100 million difference between like people who have seen the same movie, right, with unique viewers. What does this mean for ticket sales overall? And what does this mean for like movies reaching the American audiences? I'm not going to get super deep into, the math, but prior to these massive upcharges, and I think there were still probably upcharges. There definitely were still upcharges to like 3D and IMAX when Avatar 1 came out.
Okay.
But what do you think the reach was? Like the percent of the US population who bought a ticket to Avatar 1, Avatar 2, and Avatar 3?
To answer your question, you're saying Avatar 3, you said, is about a little over 5% currently, right? Okay.
Probably tied with Sinners now, so we're probably at like 5.6%.
Okay, 5.6% for that's the 3. I'm going to say that the trend was going to be diminishing returns. So back when Avatar 1 came out, I would say because at the time it was the next James Cameron movie from the guy that brought you Titanic, it had been years. I remember what a huge deal it was. I'm going to say 10% of the US box office or the US population went to go see that movie. And then call it 8% for Avatar 2. And I'm going to say now we're down at 5.6%. How does that stack up?
Your assumptions are correct. Your percentages themselves are too cautious.
Too cautious. All right. I'm not a numbers guy, Max. What
No,
can
it's okay.
I
Honestly, there's no way to know this because people don't talk about the box office like this. They only talk in total numbers, right? So Avatar 1,
Oh, boy.
the number of people, the percentage of people of the US population who went to the movie theater and bought a ticket for that movie, according to my really shoddy math, is 20.5%.
Wow. 1 in 5 people in America was like, yep, I bought a ticket to Avatar.
Which is probably around 65 million unique purchases.
Okay.
If we were to do the math with today's ticket numbers, 65 times 17, I mean, you're talking about, that would be $1.1 billion at the domestic box office alone.
Wow.
And Avatar 3 is like not even at a third of that. So Avatar 2, still pretty impressive numbers. That was 11.2%.
Wow.
And Avatar 3, we're at 5.6. It might top out around like 6.5%. But it's very clear that like the US hunger for another Avatar movie is shrinking pretty significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I think that is felt even on this sample size of 2 with our population of 2.
Who have a podcast and are required to go see movies for a living.
It took one of them 7 weeks to go see it, and the other one still hasn't seen it. So, I think we're a good reflection of that. Wow.
From the Ghost in the Machine, Gemini itself said, I thought something very interesting. Analyzing the Avatar trilogy through this lens is like watching the evolution of the premium ticket itself. James Cameron didn't just make movies, he also pioneered a new way to charge for them. Dave,
wow.
Is this a good thing?
I will say I think I've heard snippets of this from Big Jim's interviews in promoting the film. He has alluded to the fact that years ago he has seen where the market for the theatrical experience is going. He's incredibly smart. And I think my lament for James Cameron, which I've expressed on this podcast, is like, he's the guy that brought us all these incredible movies from my childhood in the 80s and the 90s that were much more grounded, still fantastical, of course, but had elements of like real world background, like a True Lies, like a Terminator. And I've wanted him to be in that world for longer instead of the last 25 years of living in Pandora. However, I think he's been very smart to know that this is what ultimately the audience wants, is this escapism, this world building, and has found a way to push the technology, not just of how it's captured, but again, how it's projected to the audience forward. So yeah, I think he's just really freaking smart. But I think more business smart than I almost want him to be,
That's a great way to put it. I don't disagree. If you want to do what James Cameron does, which is constantly push the technology of filmmaking and even just like image capture, animation, and visual effects, all the technology that he's pushed, yes, you do need to spend a lot of money. And in order to make that money back, you have to find a way to upcharge the average movie-going experience. He actually recently came out and he said, if we want to see an Avatar 4 and 5, we have to find a way to make these films cheaper. So he has recognized that even with those premium tickets. But I would say, contrary to your point, and contrary to James Cameron's I've seen where the film audiences are going thing, is Sinners, where you have a movie sold the same number of tickets, was made a lot cheaper, and might even end up being more profitable. Avatar 3 needed to clear $1 billion gross worldwide in order to see any profits at all. It's currently sitting around 1.2, 1.3. So like the returns coming into Disney are, nobody's going to say no to $100 million, but it's really not that much for the amount of money that they spent on this thing.
The stakes are at an all-time high. And again, we caveat this often that we are, American leaning in our views of movies and our analysis of movies. But we do like to talk about the international markets and how it reflects on that. So much of this movie's profits is made internationally. And more and more have his movies in general, from Avatar 1 to 3, the expectations for it to make money internationally has been more and more critical. Oftentimes, we've mentioned that the breakdown used to be maybe 50-50 back in the 90s, where it was 50% in the US and 50% internationally. Nowadays, the average is about 1/3 domestically to 2/3 internationally. And I think, Max, the data that I've seen online is this movie, Avatar 3, is even more international, where it's like 1/4 is domestic and then 3/4 is international.
Important to note, just for our listeners, that the returns that a studio sees on international box office is significantly less than a return that you would see on a domestic ticket. So while it is very impressive to do something like $900 million in international markets, you might be getting 25% of that instead of 50% of that from a local market. So
exactly. Yeah.
Dave, just for some comparisons, right?
Okay.
We're talking Avatar 3 and we're talking Sinners sitting at about 5.6% of the reach for the US. Avatar 1 got all the way up to 20.5%. Recent comparisons, Inside Out 2, 16% reach.
Okay. Wow.
Deadpool and Wolverine, 11.8%. Feels like it should be higher, but evidently a lot of repeat viewers and a lot of premium tickets sold. Avengers Endgame, any guesses on that one?
The reach on that, did that hit the 20% marker that Avatar? No, Avatar, not even as much as Avatar 1 did. Was that,
no.
Tell me, was that 10%? 15?
No, it's better than that. It was 17.7, which is extremely impressive by no doubt.
Yeah.
Top Gun 2, 14.5, Barbie 14.5, Oppenheimer 5.4.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So, Dave, a few questions, and then I actually want to talk about the history of James Cameron's movies in this context.
Okay.
But if we're talking about you as a studio head, and you're looking at the box office receipts alone, do you want higher box office receipts, or do you want more ticket sales? As a studio head.
I think this is easy for me to be more artsy fartsy, but of course, I mean, looking back in the comparison that you made, I would have rather made Sinners than Avatar.
Sure.
And I think there's a cultural, another intangible is there's a conversation that we also have on the pod, which is about cultural relevance. And I think the knock on Avatar over the last 20 years is the amount of money that it technically made at the box office and the lack of a cultural footprint that it also made in our world.
I have thoughts on that as well,
okay,
but we'll get to that in a second. But yes, you want ticket sales.
Ticket sales, yes.
Right. Okay, so even if the movie's bringing in less cash, you want more people going to the movie theater.
100%.
How about as a creative?
Also, even as a businessman, the ticket sales of like you're exposing it to more people. You not just the soft signs of cultural impact, but that then there are more people to talk about it, to maybe potentially suggest it to someone else to see it, maybe not even in the theatrical frame, but later on when it's on home entertainment. So yes.
And I think that home entertainment is a big point, but also I think just in general, you creating movie goers. Right. So the more tickets you sell, the more people go to movie theaters, the more people have a good time in a movie theater, they're more likely they'll go again. So the broader health of your entire slate is improved by one movie selling more tickets than selling fewer tickets. Whereas if you have something like Avatar 3 and these diminishing returns that have gone cut in half every single time, right? 20.5% to 11% to 5.5%, you got to be saying, I'm not really encouraging people to go to the movies by making movies like Avatar, even though I really enjoyed Avatar. So James Cameron himself. So he's directed 10 movies, adjusted for inflation in today's dollars. Worldwide, 5 of those have grossed over $1 billion. That's all 3 Avatars, Titanic and Terminator 2. Wow. True Lies got close. It made $795 million. And Aliens... 30 years ago. Well, no, this is adjusted for inflation. Again, adjusted for inflation. Aliens cleared $500 million at 515.
Okay.
Domestically alone, 2 of those cross $1 billion in today's dollars. That's Titanic and Avatar 1. And then 2 cross $500 million. That's T2 and Avatar 2. So just as a little guess, which of Jim's movies, Big Jim's movies, did the most people, like the most unique viewers, see in theaters?
I guess I got to say Titanic.
Probably, right? And then which of Jim movies have the most meaningful and lasting influence, in your opinion, on American culture?
I think I also have to say Titanic.
I'm going to say Terminator movies.
You think
Even
Terminator?
though
Oh yeah,
even though
yeah,
fewer movie theater goers have seen them, who knows with home video and stuff like that? Although
sure,
Titanic, it's going to be really hard to beat, kind of
yeah,
regardless. But I
yeah.
just feel like conversations about robots taking over, the whole where we are with AI right now. People talk about Skynet more than they say King of the World anymore. Although Titanic, the way that film was made, has changed the way films got made ever since it came out and stuff like that. So it's up for debate. But my personal opinion would be Terminator. Let's see what the numbers say. So I'm going to ignore Piranha 2, his first directorial debut,
Fair, okay.
because he came in and replaced a director halfway through. It was a Roger Corman B film and was just meant to be played at drive-ins. It had only reached about 0.06% of the human population. But directorial debut with Terminator 1, 4.6% of the human population, of the US American population. He wrote a movie that he did not direct. That was Rambo 2. And I didn't realize how massive of a hit this was. That reached 16.8% of the US population at the time. That's a better reach than Inside Out 2 had and Deadpool and Wolverine had,
Wow,
and
I didn't know he
almost as
wrote
much
that.
as Avengers Endgame.
Wow, I did not know he wrote that. That's
He wrote
incredible.
Rambo 2. I mean, I think there were other story credits and screenplay, but he was a big part of that. Aliens, 9% US reach, which is great. The
Yeah,
Abyss, he takes a little bit of a dip with 5.2.
love the Abyss.
He worked with his ex-wife, Catherine Bigelow,
Mhm.
doing some story and writing work on Point Break. That had a 3.8%. Terminator 2 comes in at 17.2%. That's pretty much right around Avengers Endgame.
Wow.
True Lies, 13%, which is pretty high. I can't believe how big of a hit that movie was. I mean, it's awesome. I
Huge.
loved it. But it's
Huge.
like, it's weird because nobody ever talks about it. And it was a massive, massive movie. And then we come in with Titanic. Now, we know that Avatar 1 had a 20% reach. Like 1 in 5 people in the US bought a ticket to go see that movie. What do you think
Okay.
it was for Titanic?
Man, 25%. I mean, I felt like everyone saw this. Maybe even 30. Was it 30? Higher? No way.
Yeah.
I don't know. You gotta put me out of my misery.
43%.
Jesus.
Which is bananas.
Yeah,
I would
it's
have
great.
never guessed it was that high because the other movies that have this kind of reach in the American box office history, it's Gone with the Wind and like Ben-Hur.
Wow.
Now, Gone with the Wind and Ben-Hur, or Gone with the Wind was released at a time where there was no TV, there was no internet or anything, blah, blah, blah. And it ran in theaters for 4 years. So it just kept coming around. So people kept buying tickets for it. And similar with Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur, I think, ran for like 2 years. And Gone with the Wind had like 69%. Ben-Hur had around 50%. Again, these numbers are general. They're kind of shoddy. But as a standard of comparison, I was using the same math to compare these movies to one another. So but like Titanic in a post home video reality, right? So the TV's out and home video is out. It's not even close. Titanic has a 43.9% reach. The Force Awakens, Star Wars, when Star Wars came back, that was 27.
Wow, 43%. It's just there's nothing that can compare to that, Max.
Not
That's
even.
insane.
I mean, I'm shocked that Star Wars got that high, but it was Star Wars, man. It was fucking Star Wars.
Yeah, since years since there were the prequels, and this was the next step. So
yeah, everybody had a lot. Forgive my pun, but everybody had a lot of hope about those movies, so we all came out to see them. Then third place was Avatar with 20.5. Right behind that is Lion King and Incredibles 2, both at 20.4, which I'm kind of surprised that Incredibles 2 beat Jurassic Park at 20.2. And then you had Star Wars Phantom Menace, Inside Out 2, Terminator 2, Avengers Endgame, Shrek 2, Finding Nemo, all around 16, 17%. And then Forrest Gump and Home Alone at about 15%. Then Top Gun 2, Spider-Man 1, and Dark Knight. The second half of that list is more franchise stuff. The first half of the list is more originals. James Cameron occupies 2 out of 3 of those top spots. Both of those movies are original movies. I think that's pretty cool.
Very cool.
So, James Cameron's influence on American culture. more individual Americans have gone and bought a ticket to his movies than anybody else since the advent of television or home video, DVD, streaming, any of that stuff. Dave, last few questions here. What do you think James Cameron's lasting impact on American culture is?
Yeah, I think it's actually felt less now, but definitely around the launch of the first Avatar one. And Max, I think you spoke to this. Is I think one of the tenets is his push for the technology to improve in the theatrical experience.
Yeah.
And this phrase of IMAX and PLF, which is premium large format, it wasn't invented with Avatar 1, but I remember the theaters improving by leaps and bounds around that time to try to make it where that is the theaters have the ability to show stuff like that. And there was a moment, the year leading into Avatar 1 and after, where it was a question: will all big movies be shown in 3D? Will all big movies be shown in IMAX?
Yeah.
And that it hasn't quite lived up to that. But there are a lot of those movies that do, and that's in thanks to James Cameron.
Well, I mean, the crazy thing about that is like James Cameron invented a technology so great only James Cameron could wield it. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't even I'm surprised in some ways, but also not. And I'm kind of grateful. But George Lucas could have done that for Star Wars. He could have gone to James Cameron and be like, let's do this for the next Star Wars movies. But only Avatar 3, Avatar 2, for all their flaws, there's nothing that even comes close to what those movies look like.
It's true.
It's not even, it's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
What's interesting, what you say about the technology, sorry, I'm going to, one more thing is that the other two directors who are frequently on the list of like biggest number of individual tickets bought in the US is Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. And those are all three guys who have constantly pushed what is technologically possible in a movie. And then if you include Walt Disney's animation and Pixar, that's almost the whole list. Almost, not quite. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's interesting that the biggest spectacles, it seem to sell the most individual tickets. And that mathematically, I don't know if that's kind of like a no duh, no shit type of conclusion to make, or it's just kind of like the mathematical truth of it. I'm a little surprised by it. A little surprised.
Yeah, I guess for me, Max, thank you for breaking down all these numbers. And I think to also quantifying, the types of filmmakers that have been quote unquote the most successful in the box office have often been, doing so because of their technical ability and their ability and desire to push the technology forward. But I don't know, maybe this is just me being such a softie, but like that's not what I personally love about James Cameron. Like I think for me, it's like you said it earlier on the pod of like his development of strong female characters, starting with Ellen Ripley in Aliens and Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, and even Jamie Lee Curtis in True Lies, and her arc from being like a quieter housewife to really like finding her strength, like that.
You see it even in The Abyss, like it's all over the place, and then
as well as he can just choreograph and block. And raise the stakes for any action sequence in anything, even in Avatar 2, which I was saying to you, I was mostly out on. The last 40 minutes, the dude just like turns on a switch and he's just like, all right, I'm going to fucking let it rip. And then
like, where has this been for the last 2 hours?
I think for me, that's the tragedy of James Cameron is that like, to your point of like, it's that he followed that technical ability, which of course made him, was incredibly lucrative. And yet, if I was just being a cinephile fan, would I have loved, him to actually focus on more grounded action movies where I know he could do it? But maybe he just got fucking bored and he was just like, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to live in my world of Pandora.
Well, I mean, when he gets interested in something, there's no stopping him. I mean, after Titanic, instead of going to make any movie he wanted to go make, he built submarines and he fucking drove around the ocean for 10 years. And then he's like, now I want to go to Pandora. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
2 more questions for you, Dave, and then we'll wrap up here. But I've all this talk this episode about ticket sales versus box office. And what does that mean? But really at the end of the day, the question I have for you is, do ticket sales in a movie theater directly translate to impact and influence on American culture? Or are the movies that are most dear to us, or the movies that most impact American culture, is their influence a little bit more ethereal?
Yeah, that's such a big question. I do love, Max, how you do break down the percentage of the US population going to see movies. I do think that's really interesting. I will add a layer to this, which is
Mm.
how much in the last couple of years it depends on the people that want to voice those opinions, whether it's via a podcast or a social media feed. And now I think the quote unquote impact on culture is also influenced by the amount of people making noise. So to your earlier question of just like, hey, if it's fewer people just seeing the movies on premium and large formats, if those people are also the ones that leave it and then talk about it a lot and
Mm.
then influence movie culture, whether it's on Rotten Tomatoes, as I roll, or Letterboxd, or IMDb.com, or commenting on podcasts like this, or frankly bigger podcasts. I don't
Right.
know if if the culture impact versus frankly shots fired on your dad, but your dad is the independent movie owner. He saw this and was totally out on it.
I don't know if anybody hated it more than my dad hated it.
But my bet is does he have a social media feed where he voiced that? My assumption is no.
No.
So I don't know if is it younger technician people that are going to see it in PLF and then want to talk about it more. Maybe
that's
that will
another
help influence the culture. I don't know.
It's another great question, is who goes to see it and why? And is that any less significant? I go to movies largely to have a dialogue about human experience. But I don't have an engineer's brain. What is the experience that an engineer or painter going to see Avatar 3 probably had a really different experience than me? Not to say that those types of folks aren't interested in those things, but people's brains do function differently. So maybe like the type of influence that Avatar 3 is having in our culture is unseen, because it's not talked about in the same ways that we usually talk about movies, which is mostly through the themes of a narrative, which in Avatar 3, they're very basic. And also they've been done in 2 previous Avatar movies. So, okay. Last question, Dave. Do you think Avatar 3 was successful?
No, which is insane for a movie that's grossed around 1.3 billion. We'll also see when the Academy Awards get nominated, and normally these movies get put up for a lot of technical awards, but also the Golden Globes did not honor Avatar in many ways for technical awards. It was more towards movies like Wicked for Good and F1 and Sinners, which more filled the role of the blockbuster movie, the mainstream movie that also had appeal. And also, I think there's a high likelihood that the original plan of making more Avatars, again, James had talked about making Avatar 4 and 5. I think that's less likely. I think, to your point of the diminishing returns of the culture from 20% to 11% to 5.5%, shows that this was a $1.3 billion movie is unsuccessful, is what I'm saying.
It's kind of a weird way to look at it, right? Yeah. I'm going to use a different quantifier to say that it was successful, and I'm going to completely avoid money altogether, right? Because what it does prove is that people do want this spectacle. And I think James Cameron, if he can find a way to make these movies for $200 million instead of $400 million, then like this conversation's almost moot, right? Mm-hmm. They're still selling a lot of tickets. But the real teller, I think, is going to be about like whether Avatar Land or Pandora Land or whatever they're going to call it at the Walt Disney theme parks is very successful. Because where this movie is interesting and influential, it's not in merchandise, it's not in selling toys or action figures of these characters. It's about the experience of going to Pandora. And nobody creates that experience better than the Avatar movies. And Avatar 3, I thought, gave us, even Avatar 2, for all its flaws, like gave us new experiences and new places to go. Speaking of the marketing around Jim Cameron, there's a quote from him where he was arguing with the studio executives on Avatar 1 about like this long sequence of them flying around on Banshees. Mm-hmm. And the studio executives like, yeah, but how does this advance the story? And James goes, who cares? Sometimes you just want to fly around on a Banshee. And then Avatar went on to make
A
an
billion.
insane amount of money.
Yeah.
And then I got a text from a buddy of mine and a listener to the pod. So Travis, thanks so much for doing that. And this is what he sent me after he got out. Finally went and saw the new Avatar 3 today. Glad it was still in theaters. I thought it was badass. I rewatched the second with my mom a couple days ago. I don't know what it is about them, but I love them. Couldn't tell you most of the characters' names or anything about what each one does, but it was a great cinema experience. Which, to go back to what we were saying, you're not falling in love with the mythology like you do with Star Wars, but you just can't beat the experience of seeing an Avatar movie in theaters. I think that is successful, although it's not as successful as we would hope that it would be. It'll be interesting to see what happens with these films if they get to make more. Are we going to be seeing them in even larger formats? Are they going to be playing Avatar at the Sphere in Las Vegas? If they do, I might have to go, even though I don't really want to see these movies ever again. But like, that would be pretty insane. So I don't know.
James Cameron, do a low budget character study of the Na'vi. Can you just make your Avatar 4 movie about a broken down ex-Na'vi, like with a drinking problem, trying to do what's right? Can you do a low budget version of this, James Cameron?
We know that he's not going to direct it. So what you're advocating for is a Gus Van Sant directed
in Pandora. Give me a Pandora ambulance chasing lawyer with a drinking problem trying to do what's right. I want The Verdict in Pandora is what I want.
Man, The Verdict's so good. I did just, speaking of Gus Van Sant, I did just see Dead Man's Wire, and it was awesome, and I would highly recommend it, which leads me to ask you, Dave, for our wrap up here, what are you seeing next?
Oh, man. The list is long. I feel like I had such a good run at the end of 25, and I am way behind in 26. I'm dying to see The Testament of Anna Lee, which I still have not seen. It's in a couple of theaters here in LA, and I hear it's pretty crazy. But then after all this, man, I got to see this. Though you hear my frustration with James Cameron, I got to see Avatar. I got to get it under my belt, man.
Very curious to know what you think now that I've overhyped it up for you. Possibly made the viewing experience impossible to enjoy. I saw Testament of Anne Lee. I thought it was one of the most interesting films that I ever saw. I also would love to know what anybody thought of it, including our listeners. If you have seen it, please comment on our Instagram or send us a message, because it's one of those movies where I was like, this is a wholly unique movie-going experience. I don't even know how to talk about it.
Whoa.
So
okay.
I need some help. I need some guidance. But as far as what I'm seeing next, I'm catching up on everything I missed in 2025, including the movie that I promised you all I would be first in line for, Hamnet, which has now been in theaters for 3 months. So I'm going to try and see that. I'm going to try and see Marty Supreme, and then 28 years later, Bone Temple.
Hell yeah, man. We got a lot in front of us. It's a pretty good, knock wood, it's a pretty good January.
It's a killer January. Yeah. There's a lot of great shit out there. February, it's going to slow down. So
yeah. I'm still excited for Wuthering Heights, though. I'm excited for that as well.
There's going to be like 2 big movies in February, and that'll be enough because I'm still catching up on December and January.
Yeah, and Sundance is happening just in a couple of days.
No shortage of things and reasons to go to the cinema. So with that, Dave, we only got one thing left to say. I'll see you at the movies.